Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Preparedness Podcast. Today is Thursday, September 13th, another date that I'm announcing because today is the day that the Federal Reserve, in their infinite wisdom, has decided to begin quantitative easing 3, which is stretching on to infinity. I've got a post that explains this a little bit better on the site. Go ahead and check it out. But you need to be aware of that this is probably the beginning of our hyperinflationary period. No, don't worry that it's not going to start, next week, but it is something that you need to be aware of. We'll be covering more of this next week, but what I've got coming up is a 2-part interview with Charlie McGrath of WideAwakeNews.com. Chris from Legacy Foods introduced us, and I thought it would be really cool to have Charlie on because Charlie focuses on an area more of politics and especially geopolitical happenings and stuff, and that's not something that I really get into here on the show. But it is very important to keep aware of it because even though being prepared really doesn't have to revolve around politics, you do need to be aware of because it happens. For example, this QE3 it's all politics. It's all geopolitical, banking, global economy stuff, and it is stuff that you need to be aware of. So let's get on with the interview, and this will be part 1, and I'm going to release part 2 tomorrow. Charlie, welcome to the Preparedness Podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. And one of the things I thought we could talk about is the economy and the current state of, the geopolitical world that's out there. In maybe a little bit of politics, even though I don't really cover that because I don't really follow politics close enough to actually be able to, I think, speak wisely on it, which is why I typically don't cover it. But I was looking at a lot of the stuff that you've done, and you seem to be well on top of like the economy and stuff. And I thought that would be I thought it would make a good interview to talk to you about what's going on. And because I hit a lot of this last year and coming back, I haven't hit too much of the economy, but I think this is the biggest problem we have facing us from a global level. And I think it gets into so many different areas of preparedness and us in our daily lives. It affects us so much on so many different levels that I thought it would be really great to have somebody who understood, all the current stuff that's going on and have, just get in there and have a dialogue and learn some stuff.
Yeah, you bet. And thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be on the program, and hopefully I get you onto my program here in the not too distant future. And I'll tell you one thing that that I really like about doing some of this spokesman work. Obviously, I have WideAwakeNews.com and the radio program on Rinse, but doing some of this spokesman work for Legacy Premium Brand Freeze-Dried Foods, Chris Atkins over there, they're in charge of their marketing. He's doing a great job, not only with their product, but with getting me in touch with other folks in this genre. And I tell you what, I'm excited about that because I get to meet new people. I didn't until Chris Atkins had me look you up and go down and email you to come onto the program and stuff. There's so many different sites and so many different people in the genre. It's hard to know them all. But he's introducing me into new people and into new programs, and it's been fun is what it's been, and I'm happy to be here. So thanks for having me.
You're quite welcome. Yeah. Well, just to let everybody know, Legacy Foods is one of our sponsors. You can find them through the banners on the website, thepreparednesspodcast.com. There's 2 banners. There's a PrepareWise, which is on the sidebar, and up in the top banner, it rotates buyemergencyfoods.com. If you listen to my past podcasts, you'll have heard me talk about the Legacy brand of foods. I really like them. I got some samples. We tried them as a family, and I was really surprised at not only how easy they were to make, which a lot of the food can be, but really the taste is good. I was really surprised at the final product, and so I was really excited to have a sponsor like that. And
I think too, Rob. And here's the thing. And I told you before we started your program that I've been doing the radio program for a couple years, and I'm like you. I go to work every day for my living, and my passion is what I do at night, kind of like yours is the Preparedness podcast and your website. As far as I'm concerned, this is where my heart's at, because I truly believe in the things that I talk about. I believe in the things that you're bringing to folks in the way of warning and getting them prepared. And in this 2-year journey of a hobby turned into passion, I've been real hesitant to bring on sponsors because I don't want to be just another person in this genre, in this alternative media, that is trying to drive up their numbers, trying to drive up a mailing list, trying to drive up subscribers on YouTube, and then monetize that, because there's a lot of that out there. And, you usually see through these people pretty quick because they run out of message. And I didn't, and there's a lot of advertisers out there like that as well. Guys who just want to, peddle some gold or peddle some food or peddle whatever, peddle porn, or pessimism porn rather. Jeez. You might want to edit that out. Pessimism porn. You've heard that term before, I'm sure.
Sure, yeah.
But there's a lot of people that do that. They get out there, scare people, and then say, call this number and buy whatever I'm selling. And I stayed away from that. And so I've ended up with now 3 sponsors for the program. Every one of them is completely dedicated to their product. They're completely dedicated to customer service. And in the case of bioemergencyfoods.com and preparewise.com offering Legacy Premium, these guys not only are preppers themselves and care about, getting people to be prepared, they care about what goes into that Mylar flushed bag, or nitrogen flushed Mylar bag. They want to make sure that it's, the best quality, the most calories, which I know is kind of counterintuitive to pop culture, but calories equal survival in a preparedness situation or in an emergency situation. But they're putting out an excellent product. They believe in what they're doing, and they're absolutely 100% focused on being 100% satisfaction guaranteed. So I think it's a good fit for your podcast and your website. I know it's a good fit for my radio program and website. And I think it's really important that people understand the condition that the world is in, the condition that brought us to this point, and where we're going into the future. And if you understand that condition, then the notion of having emergency supplies, especially water and food, for an extended period of time, so you do not have to go out and take part in any kind of civil unrest or any kind of disaster scene that's unfolding in your community. You can stay home and take care of you and your family. That is paramount. I mean, that's above everything else.
Yeah, that's something that we've hit on this podcast a lot is, food and water storage is some of the main things you have to worry about, because even something as simple as, there's a panic, whether it's, a northeaster blizzard coming in, or, flooding, or, economic collapse, people rush to the food stores and they buy, bread, milk, eggs. And if you need to go out and buy the same because you don't have any food storage, it doesn't matter whether or not you get the food. People are panicked. You could get into a car accident and have to go to the hospital, or even lose your life simply because people are panicking in the streets. And if you had food storage, all you have to do, chances are we're going to be at work when this happens. So what you need to do is you need to focus on getting home and not have to worry about, oh my gosh, I don't have anything to feed my family, or what if the power goes out? You're prepared. And that, again, that's why I was excited to have a quality sponsor for food, because food storage to me is a huge thing, because it allows you to have opportunity and options that you don't have if you're not prepared. Look at what's happening in Spain right now. That's amazing.
Yeah, Spain is. We're not catching this obviously with the political kabuki theater we have going on here. It's really not being covered a lot by the mainstream, or at all. But Spain is mass protest, mass rioting. People there's no jobs for the people in Spain. They're in a very crisis situation. And it isn't just Spain. We saw it in Greece. We saw people literally killing themselves in front of Parliament inside of Greece. They're now a third world nation, but it is rapidly spreading throughout Europe. In fact, just last week, we had Monty Draghi, the head of the European Central Bank, come out and talk about the all-saving grace, which is going to be this OMT program, outright monetization transaction, where the Central Bank of Europe will act a lot like our Federal Reserve here and issue unlimited amounts of money to issue more debt to the nations of Europe. Now, of course, the markets rallied on this news. It was up 200 points the day this announcement came out. But I've taken a stance that if you see the Dow Jones go up, if you see a big rally in the markets, that truly is counterintuitive to your best interest going into the future. And that might sound crazy, but look, every time the markets go up now, it isn't because of fundamental reasons. It isn't because we're creating jobs in this country. It isn't because manufacturing's return or the housing market's return or social safety nets are diminishing. None of that is true. In fact, when the markets go up, you can be guaranteed of one thing: they're turning on the printing presses, or at least alluding to the notion of turning on the printing presses. And just if you play that scenario out alone, you have a situation where hyperinflation is put onto the table. Factor in, you have the Department of Agriculture coming out 2 weeks ago saying 50% of the corn crop is either poor or very poor condition. We see food prices increasing dramatically over the last couple of years. Just looking at the economics point of view of it, just looking at the expense that it will potentially save you by putting in supplies now versus a year from now, it makes sense to put some legacy premium freeze-dried food into your possession, not only because it'll last you for 25 years, but you're probably going to make a pretty decent return on your investment just if the central banks do what they say they're going to do. And, you talked about nor'easters and other natural disasters. Those, at least from my perspective, seem to be certainly on the rise. We have more flooding. We have more drought, which, it's crazy. The areas that are usually dry are wet. The areas that are wet are now dry. We have real crop damage here in this country last winter and in Europe last summer. And everybody from the Department of Agriculture to the World Health Organization, everybody's talking about food crisis is on its way. And for those that don't know, you probably inform your audience of this, but the supermarket you go to every day to pick up your groceries, if you're once a week, or some people shop every day for what they need, virtually every item in that store traveled 1,500 miles to get to that store. Not only that, they turn that inventory. It's what in the world of inventory turns, the grocery supermarket is the highest turn rate of any of them. They turn it about every 3 days. What that means is it takes 1,500 miles to get to that supermarket, and in 3 days, if those trucks weren't rolling in there, it would be empty. So you're right. You have some disaster, man-made, natural, or otherwise. It lasts more than a couple days. Well, you're in a lot of trouble. You've led yourself into a real food crisis.
Well, that's only if nobody panics. It'll last 3 days. And we've already seen several examples where it doesn't, where people panic, they go out and they're stocking up, and suddenly the shelves are bare because that 3 days is based on normal buying patterns. And it's only really comes out to be a few hours when people panic and they start buying whatever they think they need. Did you hear, and I haven't had a chance to actually track this one down, but I've been hearing through the Twitter basically that there's been a lot of food. Basically, people are going to the grocery stores in Spain, loading up their carts and just walking out and saying, "Hey, too bad."
Yeah, come get me.
Yeah, it's like they don't have the money,
right? But they need the food, so they're going to come in and take it. And I've told a story in my program before that illustrates where I think we're going. I think what you see in Spain, you can see that in America right now in some places, especially. If you travel to the Detroit area, if you travel to the Midwest, it's been so devastated by the evisceration of the manufacturing base. My sister lives in Alabama. There's some rural parts of the South, the Deep South, that they were devastated because of the oil disaster down there, and it's a completely different world to what you're used to in Arizona, what I'm used to in Montana. But so looking at Spain as a model, I see that happening here already to some extent, but it could certainly happen. But I remember when you're ex-military, I'm ex-military. I remember when I was in Papa Bush's Gulf War, the first Gulf War, and we sat. I was in the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment, 7th Corps. We were in Germany. We went down to Saudi Arabia, and we were the first unit across the berms into Iraq, then did a hook into Kuwait. But I sat there while they bombed for 40 plus days Iraq. They did this big air campaign, and we rolled in. And I remember the first town we went into where there were civilians. First of all, for those that don't remember Iraq pre-1990, Iraq was a pretty developed nation. I mean, as far as infrastructure, schools, they had highways, they had a power grid, they had great education, they had great healthcare. It was almost developed to the point of being a Western country. But after 40 plus days of war, they lost all their infrastructure. They lost all their clean water. They lost their electricity. And I remember going into one of the first towns we went into and having civilians out in the streets, and you're seeing kids that are, they're begging for food, and you see a few women and a few older men, because most of the fighting age men were conscripts. And I remember throwing MREs to kids and watching, elderly Iraqis who had been entered into the Stone Age for 45 days pummel little kids to get that MRE. And that's the situation I don't want anybody that I care about. I don't want any of my fellow Americans to be in that situation. And it sounds far-fetched, and it sounds like it couldn't happen here. But if you don't think it can happen here, you're really not dealing in reality. Because if it can happen in Greece, if it can happen in Spain, if it can riots can happen in France, if we can have an announced depression in Italy with no hope other than turning over your sovereignty to a central bank, it can happen here. In fact, I truly do believe we will see it here within, if not the next year, within the next couple of years for sure.
Yeah, it's so hard to imagine that happening here, and it's so difficult to talk to people and tell them, hey, you know what, you should. Yeah, and I don't mean like the preppers. I think preppers are some of the smartest bears in the forest. But when you talk to the other animals in the forest and tell them that, you should have some food, you should do a little preps, you should have, an evacuation plan, and they look at you like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, we've got this quantitative easing, and looks like we're going to have a third round, and we're $16 trillion in debt. And they're like, well, I still have a job, and sure, food is a little more expensive and gas more expensive, but it's not that bad. And I'm like, yeah, but you look in other parts of the country, and back in a few weeks ago, I think it was end of August, I had a podcast about the current economy, and I had a few years ago I had put up some questions that people could pose to themselves just to ask, hey, does it look like, don't worry about what the mainstream media says, don't worry about what the newspapers are saying, just forget TV, ask yourself some questions. And basically I had this list of 17, but it's stuff like, is unemployment going down? Are people getting jobs? Are people getting raises? Are prices stabilizing? Is the dollar getting stronger? Stuff like that. And they're questions that anybody should be able to answer and quickly see, no, things aren't really getting better. Did you see the article today, or I saw it today? I don't know when it actually came out. I think it was recently, but they were saying that the unemployment rate went down from 8.3 to 8.1, not because more people are working, but because more people stopped looking for work.
Yeah. Well, in fact, it's 88,921,000 now are not in the labor force. 368,000 people were taken out of the labor force last month. 368,000. I mean, that's 2 Spokanes. That's that's a major U.S. city. 368,000 people just went off the unemployment, or out of the working force, rather.
Right.
Becoming non-persons.
Well, so I find it. These are the numbers that I find staggering. So this morning I did some number crunching on this data. So we've got 88.9 million people not in the labor force. Okay, now this is looking at people that are 16 or above, not in jail or not in prison, not in a nursing home, not in a mental institution, and aren't working for work anymore. So basically, they're eligible to work, be part of the workforce, but they've stopped. So that's almost 89 million. So I went and looked, tried to find how many people under 16 there were, and I can't find that figure, but so I had to calculate between 15 and 18, and basically it's about 22% of our populations, 21-something percent is 16 and under. Then we've got another, I got it written down here, so 13.3% of our population is 65 or older. So that's 35.2% of the workforce by age. Basically, our number crunched this down, and there are only 202 million people in the workforce right now.
Right.
88.9 plus whatever the retirement age is, you take that out, it turns out there's 51% of the workforce not working, according to these numbers right now.
And your numbers are pretty close to the official, and I'm doing air quotes, the official participation rate, which is 63.5%. The participation rate is the pool of people that you're just describing that are over 16 and over, that can go to work. They're healthy. They're physically able to. They're not in prison. They're not mentally ill. They're able to work. So out of that 100% of the workforce, 63.5 is what's out there. Now, I know that sounds a little higher than the number you just gave, but when you put it into perspective using the air quote official numbers, that's the lowest participation rate in over 3 decades. And in fact, for males, it's the lowest ever in the history of this nation since we've been keeping this record. We have the lowest participation rate for males in this country. And to to put this really into perspective, you have the data that shows 88 million not in the workforce, 368,000 taken out of the workforce last month, millions of people who are coming off 2 years of unemployment, million plus foreclosures a year, million plus bankruptcies a year. You put all this in the context of literally an untold number of trillions of dollars that have been spent since the year 2008 alone. I'm not going way back to when we started inflating bubbles, but just to 2008, when we were sitting about $8 trillion, now we're at $16 trillion, but we've had trillion upon trillion upon trillion dished out to too big to fail institutions to keep them from blowing up. And we've also had trillions go out to foreign banks. All these trillions being spent, and this is the best we can do as far as a fledgling recovery. If you think about that, digest that for a minute, you realize we live in a nation that has the lowest participation rate in over 3 decades. We live in a nation that drops off, makes non-persons 368,000 people a month. We live in a nation that decides who lives and who dies, and if you're too big to fail, you survive, and if you're not, we're going to placate you by handing you a check, some kind of social safety net, which I'm not against social safety nets, but when we're at the point where 160 million Americans, which is where we are right now, 160 million Americans, draw some kind of check every month from a government. When we're at that point, you have a very malleable populace. And when you want to control that populace, or when you want to, more importantly, when you want to pay for the fraudulent failure of a bunch of institutions that we borrowed all these trillions to bail out, all you really need to do is shut off the switch. And this can be done overnight, and you have instant deep austerity in this country, leading to everything that we were previously talking about, the riots, people looking for food, finding it, stealing it, beating up their neighbors to get it. All of that can occur virtually overnight in this country.
Right. Well, and that's what I keep thinking about is even if you try to put the best spin on it as possible and say, okay, we're trying to help people who are out of work. We're trying to help them get by through these social nets and stuff, which, I don't really mind hand ups. Continual handouts begins to wear on the system. But, the point is that even if we want to continue to support all these people, we don't have the money. We can't. I mean, at what point? I mean, we're at 16 trillion now. how many more trillions is it going to take before basically the government or whoever loans us to government says, hey, you know what? There is no more. There's no more available. I'm sorry. No more food stamps. No more government assistance for this. No more of that. It's just, sorry, your EBT cards just are denied. And overnight, like you said, you're going to have all these disgruntled people. They're not going to have anything else to do. When you have nothing to lose, then that's when you have people start to riot and revolt, and they do things they wouldn't normally do. But when they've got nothing to lose, so why not?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And I guess it just depends what path we go. There's only two, right? We can turn on the printing presses. Although we're seeing every time we quantitatively ease, we end up with a diminishing return on that investment. That's why a lot of people think they're not going to do QE3. But let's say they go that route. Then you saw what happened with gold and silver last week when Draghi came out talking about bailouts in Europe, and then the bad jobs number came out. So that spurred hope on Wall Street. Again, if you see Wall Street go up, understand you're getting closer to collapse. But it spurred hope on Wall Street that more quantitative easing was coming, and gold jumps $35. Silver goes up another $1.
Yeah.
So we go that path, then it's a situation where you use your emergency food because your income isn't keeping up. And when you're going down to the grocery store and you're seeing a hyperinflationary situation, you are at least protected. The other route is, look, and this is I'm putting my tinfoil hat on right now because this is what I truly believe is going to happen. I think we've seen over the last 4 years, we've seen the largest transfer of wealth in the history of this planet. I think we've had an engineered collapse that was announced in 2008. Extraordinary measures were put into place then, and we've seen the result of this. We've seen the explosion, a literal explosion of sovereign debt around this planet. We've seen what were once too big to fail institutions that were systemic, and we couldn't let them fail. In my opinion, these same institutions now, through their partnership in the Federal Reserve, write legislation that governs this country. Everything is in place when you look at everything from the Patriot Act and National Defense Authorization Act 2012, the build out of the security industrial complex, the transfer of wealth from the average American in far into the future to a few select too big to fails. There is going to come a point where all the pretending is done and over with. And we're going to grow our way out of it. We're going to do the kind thing for the people of this country. All of that is going to come to an end, and it's going to be an emergency situation where they say we need to implement austerity, and we need to do it now, and we need to do it hard to get our house in order. And that's when you'll have literal pandemonium. They'll do a good job of framing the fight, though. They'll do a good job of making it a blue versus red dilemma where it's all these people on welfare. It's their fault. Or, it's all these corporate bigwigs. It's their fault. You'll have the country divided between red and blue camp, fighting with each other, not paying attention to what really got us here, and more importantly, not paying attention to who's going to take care of them when this does proverbial hit the fan. And the answer to that question is simple. No one is going to take care of you. You need to take care of yourself. You need to take care of your family and your loved ones now, because if you don't, you're going to be one of the just masses in the streets looking for answers to the problem, but more importantly, looking for a way to take care of you and your loved ones.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. I mean, I generally don't get into politics on the podcast. At least I try not to, because it's not really an area that I'm very smart in. But, when you look at the things you said and you're like, oh, that can't be true. And if you go beyond just spewing that, that can't be true, and you go to research it and you find out that, that does kind of seem to hold some water, and that does seem to be true. It's really scary how much of it is true. As I was telling you when we were talking before the show here, we were going, me and some friends and people, we were trying to talk about this in the mid 80s and tell people about, hey, look at where things seem to be going. You need to pay attention. You really need to vote a more of a pro-Constitution sort of platform, and nobody wanted to hear it. And well, now 20 years later, everything is worse. And I don't get into politics because, quite honestly, Party A is no different than Party B. And when Party C comes along, they become usurped by somebody else, and it just gets derailed. And
Well, you might not get into politics, but it sounds to me like you know everything you need to know. There is no politics, folks. It doesn't exist. I mean, it's a building of a camp. And you're right. You build a camp and you paint them red, and you build this one, you paint them blue, and you have this, this theater going on, in the Democrat convention and the Republican convention. But at the end of the day, look, they're going to do the exact bidding of Wall Street. This is who funds them. This is who pays for them. And I made a video here a few days ago, and I said, if you want to have control, at least if you want to feel like you voted for somebody that has control over your future, forget about Obama, forget about Romney, vote Bernanke, write him in. Because, you're still going to get screwed. You're still going to get the burden put on your shoulder, and you're still going to see your standard of living decrease. But at least you voted for the winner.
Right. Yeah. Well, I saw to bring pop culture into this, the Hunger Games was really popular. And I had never read the book, but I recently saw the movie, and I remember when the movie came out, people were saying, "Oh, I'm so glad, that'll never happen here." And maybe not in those words, but that's kind of what they were saying. I'm like, "What are you talking about? That's exactly what's happening here right now." You try to tell people, "Hey, beware of inflation. It's coming. It's happening." And we have inflation now, and we're trying to. What we're doing is we're hoping that we won't have hyperinflation, but you need to prepare for it. And like, well, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, I don't know. My food is going up. My electricity is going up. My fuel costs are going up. My health care is going up. There isn't anything that isn't going up. That's inflation. But yet
it's a hidden tax that robs you of your wealth. And what's really sad is inflation is the most optimistic future that we're looking at. That's the best, is a controlled inflation. I don't think that's what's coming. We're either going to go and do some kind of some form of hyperinflation, or we're going to go into a deflationary spiral. Either one of those equals really, really difficult times.
Right. Well, one of the mantras I have in the podcast is for the listeners to do their own research, and I definitely recommend that they look into hyperinflation and how it starts and why it happens and what exactly is involved with it. And see, when we hear about historical hyperinflationary events, we're reading something that's time compressed, that it seems like it happened over maybe 6 months, 12 months, maybe a couple years, when in reality, we're talking, a decade or two long type of event. And so, we are seeing this now. It's not classic hyperinflation, but we are experiencing, inflationary prices that are really starting to eat into everybody's pocketbook. And when people aren't getting raises because businesses aren't really keen on it, because they know what's going on. They have their own economic forecasters, and they know that the economy isn't doing well. And so
they have their pick. It's an employer's market. I don't have to pay. I don't have to pay an employee if he comes in and demands a raise. I don't have to do that. Why? There's 25 people behind him that will do it for less. So
yeah, there's plenty of people standing in line for your job, and that becomes another preparedness item that people need to be aware of. Is you need to make yourself invaluable at your job. Right. If that means don't ask for a raise for a year or two because you're like, what, I think I'm being paid probably where I'm at and I need this job, then do it. You need to find other ways, because chances are you're not going to get it anyways. Yeah. I know the place I work is everybody wants a raise, but it isn't happening. And, we all know it's a small company. We all know that our business is suffering because of economic conditions, and they're not something you can directly tie to any one thing. But when you look at the whole macro picture, you can see, oh, okay, well, this led to this, and this domino fell from that, and eventually gets down to us, and that's what happens.
No doubt. And again, I think over the last 5 years, we've seen this papering over of what the market's trying to do. In real free market capitalism, if that's what we were dealing with here, we wouldn't see Citigroup, we wouldn't see Wells Fargo or Goldman Sachs. These companies would be gone. They might have the names out there somewhere, but the companies themselves would be bankrupt because of what happened in an engineered collapse in 2008. And instead of doing that, we paper it over and bail these guys out and give them unlimited resources. And eventually, we're going to pay the piper. And the people that I don't know if I feel sorry for is the right word, but the people that I'm the most concerned with are not the real low end of the social economic scale, because they see it now. I mean, they're out there. They see how hard it is to get a job. They see how wages are down. They see if they lose their job, there's 15 more people there to take their place. So they understand it. The uber elite, well, you know what? They're buying gold. They're buying emergency supplies. They're, in a lot of cases, they're making plans to get out of Dodge. So they understand. So you have the middle that's left, the great middle class, decreasing middle class in this country. And a lot of my friends are in that upper middle class social economic level. And a lot of them are going to be the ones hit like a 16-pound sledgehammer between their eyes, because they think they're part of the system. They think they have it all figured out. They think they're part of the game because they have a 401k that came back to 2000 levels, because they have a job, because, Ben Bernanke said that he's not going to let the economy implode. They think that they're safe and that their life's not going to change. And yeah, their house fell by 45%, but it'll come back because Ben Bernanke says they always do. And these are the folks who are, taking vacations, not worrying about anything other than their paper investments. These are the guys who are going to be, this will be in 29, you had people jumping off buildings. This is where the crew is going to come from. This is where the people who are going to have lost everything and lost all hope are going to come from, are these middle class, upper middle class folks, think they got it figured out. And then when the rug's pulled out from under them, they have nothing and they're not prepared for anything. So they're going to be truly, truly hopeless.
Right. Well, and you're seeing that. I mean, if you watch the internet news channels, basically, you're seeing a lot of the rich people and the people who got the money. They're buying gold. They're making plans to move out of the country or something like that. Even like these Facebook guys, there is an issue about that. They're doing the same thing. They see this. And like you said, the people at the low end of the spectrum, they're already living this. They've already made the sacrifices to give up pretty much everything they had going on in their life to get to a point where they can survive every day. And it's the people in the middle who are, they're probably still having a tough time paying their mortgage. They're probably still having a tough time paying their bills. But yet, they're so busy trying to work that they're not looking ahead. They're looking down in front of them to make sure they don't trip right now. And they're not seeing what's coming. And it's going to take a lot of effort to give up all these things, to give up your cell phone, to give up your cable TV, to give up your high-speed internet, because you have to.
Right.
Those are going to be stressors that people are going to be feeling, just a few of the stressors. And then add on top of that, hey, I don't have enough money to buy food for my family. Or, hey, I don't have the gas to get to work, and it's a choice. Do I buy food for my family, or do I fill up my tank so I can go to work next week? I mean, it does come down. Look, I've been poor. I know what it's like to make these decisions of, do I eat or do I pay bills, or do I I can afford 3 gallons of gas, and I can afford some boxes of macaroni and cheese, and hopefully things will be better next week. And luckily, back then, it was just me. I can't even imagine trying to go through those decisions with a family. I have a wife and 3 kids, and this is one of the biggest reasons I prepare, is because I've been there, and I don't want to be there again, and I will do whatever it takes not to be there.
I think you would literally have to be, even these people that I'm talking about that are in this upper middle class who think they've got it figured out, when I have these conversations with them, and you get that deer in the headlights glazed over look, like, okay, right, you're crazy. This can never happen here.
Yeah.
Really, you said in the late 80s, early 90s, you were talking these topics, and people thought, okay, well, Rob's a little bit nuts. We're gonna let him, do his rant and then move on. But if you're living in this country in 2012, and you're an adult, and you saw 9/11, and you saw everything that's come since 9/11, with the build out of the security industrial complex, with in 99 the dismantling of Glass-Steagall, these banks becoming uber powerful. if you can open your eyes and look around the world and tell yourself that it isn't getting worse, man, I tell you what, I want whatever they're on to totally blank out reality like that.
Right.
Because it's painfully obvious we're heading for a climax of some sort or another. And you just, I don't know how to deliver the message any stronger than you just don't want to be putting yourself in a crisis situation that is 100% avoidable. And that, at least on the topic of food, I'm looking at Bioemergency Foods website right now. 180 serving entree bucket is $260. 180 servings is one person, 60 days worth of calories. 60 days, $260. It's less than $1.44 a serving. It's less than an iPhone. It's less than an iPad. It's less than an NFL football ticket if you don't want to be in the nosebleeds. It's less than 10 ounces of silver. Get yourself prepared. Get yourself a cushion, a bumper. Give yourself the best insurance policy you can, which is the ability not to have to go out and enter into a crisis situation.
Exactly right, and you've got to do it. But I think the people who listen to the podcast and people who watch Wide Awake News, they get it. But I think there are a lot of people out there who they got those blinders on, and they're and I don't know how to reach them. Like, I know a few people who are relatively well off, and I keep telling them, you know what, you should have some food storage. You should put away some preps for this. And their attitude is, well, I've got money. I'll always be able to buy it. It doesn't matter how expensive it gets. And I keep trying to tell them that only works if it's available.
Right.
And it's lost. They just don't get it.
I'm buying if it ain't there.
Okay, that wraps up part 1. I'm going to release part 2 tomorrow. And again, I'm just breaking it up because otherwise it'd be well over an hour. And I felt that everything in there was relevant and was good information. So I just look for part 2 tomorrow. Before I close, I do want to mention one cool thing. Bioemergencyfoods.com is giving us an exclusive discount for the next 15 days. So if you're listening to this in September of 2012, you have until the 29th to get an extra 10% off. Now, this is 10% off all orders. So it's a limited time. It's exclusive to the listeners of the Preparedness Podcast. And to get this special offer, you need to go to the website, thepreparednesspodcast.com. Click on either the bioemergencyfoods.com banner at the top or the Prepare Wise banner on the side. When you go there, go ahead and select your foods. Then in the shopping cart, you need to use the code TPP. That's Tango Papa Papa, the 3 letters. And you're going to get your 10%. Now, this is still with free shipping. So it's not one of these bait and switches where you get free shipping unless you use the code and then you got to pay for shipping. No, this is 10% plus free shipping on all orders. Alternatively, if you want to give them a call at 1-888-543-7345 and mention the coupon code TPP and let them know you heard it on the Preparedness Podcast. I also want to thank Chris and all the folks at Legacy Foods for giving us this discount to pass along to the Preparedness Podcast family. So until next time, folks, enjoy life and be safe.